Martin Lynch is a writer, director, and producer. He has been instrumental in setting up community arts movement, pioneered the Cathedral Quarter area in Belfast, and has had hit plays such as Dockers, The History That Troubled the Court in Medea, and Dancing Shoes, The George Best Story. Welcome to The Written Word. I'm Mick Drain, and this is Martin Lynch. Throughout your career. You're very welcome to the Written Word podcast.
And I'm delighted to be here, Mick. Thank you.
And first of all, can you tell me about this award you've just won? What is the award and what does it mean to you?
Well, it was started way back in the early 80s by Charlie Hawkey, the Taoiseach at the time. He was being advised by his old university mate called Anthony, not Coughlin, Anthony, geez, I forget him, the poet writer. And this guy proposed that there should be a group of writers, a group of artists be brought together and supported by the state as they move on in years, as it were. And it became ASDANA, which has a total membership of 200.
Right.
And it's given in recognition usually for people who have completed a lifetime's work. Although people like some writers have been in it since their 30s and 40s. It also enables you to apply for a stipend if you earn below a certain amount, and it's not a huge amount of money or anything like that, but it really is. I'm just delighted to be. By the way, you have to be elected onto it by your peers. You can't even ask to join this. You've got to have somebody who thinks your work's good enough, and I'm lucky in that Michael Longley, our most illustrious poet, has been a great supporter of mine for many, many years. And he proposed me, and Brian Maguire, a painter from Dublin, seconded. And, I got in straight away. People tell me that normally it can take 2 or 3 goes over 2 or 3 years, but I've been very lucky and got in straight away. So I'm delighted and honoured by that award.
Absolutely fantastic and well deserved. Well deserved. Tell me this, Martin. At the minute, what are you reading?
I've just finished Stalingrad by Anthony Beevor, one of the thickest books you ever saw, but which was incredibly enthralling. I'm into the Second World War, the last 2 years.
Okay.
Why?
Yeah.
I just got a big interest in it. I took a big interest in the play. Usually my reading is very often guided by whatever play I'm working on. On this occasion, it isn't. But I got into Auschwitz, and there's something bubbling away in my head about a play about Auschwitz, which is incredible. Like some of the stories I've read about it. So that led me on to reading more about the Second World War generally. And the Battle of Stalingrad is just the most astonishing story ever. And of course, what I've known for many years, but a lot of people in the West don't know, is that the Russians won the Second World War. We grew up believing it was John Wayne and Montgomery and people like that. And there is no doubt statistically and all the rest of it that the Russians broke the back of the best of the German army at the Battle of Kursk in 1942 or 3 or something like that, and then again surrounded them at the Battle of Stalingrad and took over 300 prisoners. That was the end of Russia as a fighting force. Like just a wee statistic. When the D-Day landing took place, the Russians put up 28 battalions, or whatever it's called, to fight General Patton in Montgomery. 228 was in the east fighting the Russians. That's the scale of balance and where the Second World War was actually fought. Wow. So into all of that, and then I just finished Stalingrad, and I've started a new book by, I don't read a huge amount of novels, but I'm reading Ken Follett, another big thick one by him, and I can't even remember the title of it. I just started about 3 nights ago. But I do read every night, usually for about an hour in bed, and if I don't read, I must have been drunk or incredibly tired.
Right. Okay. That's your nighttime routine to unwind then.
Every time, yeah, every night.
And tell me this: do you choose the story or the book, or do you think it chooses you?
It's a bit of both. Sometimes I go into a bookshop and like I remember walking into a bookshop way back in I think it was the 80s or early 90s and opened a book uh, by somebody I'd never heard of, Patrick McCabe. And the very first line and the very first page was the whole town was after such and such on account of what he did to Mrs. Nugent. And I just, well, I better find out. I have to find out what this is, you know. So a book can just take you with a sentence or a line like that. But usually it's organized readings, usually again to do with the plays and the research for the plays. But I also like to, keep sharp in my mind. Like I keep going back to the British philosopher, what's his name, and reading his autobiographies all the time. See, this is the problem, like when you get that bit older. Me and Murray Jones, when sometimes we're working together, and we say, and your mom is there. I says to, you know your mom. Oh, I know you're talking about. And then half an hour later, we remember the name, Bertrand Russell. I love his philosophical rumblings.
Okay. Tell me this: when it comes to what play you're going to complete another draft of or produce, you will have many plays sitting around and probably many plays on the go at once. Is there anything in particular that makes a play rise to the surface or tells you that it's the one to go with or the story to follow at that time, or is it potluck?
Well, I've always found that the play jumps out at me at a certain point.
Okay.
Um, and I can't remember exactly why or what would make that happen, but I would have at any given time 10 good ideas, what I think are good ideas. And they're all listed there. I would have taken notes on loads of them. Like, believe it or not, for 30 years, I've had a play about my dad bubbling away. It's the longest one in gestation ever. And it was only last year that I worked out the hook and how to make it work, what the storyline is, how I'm going to tell the story. So that one's sitting there ready to go, and it'll probably be the next play. So I don't know, just maybe something happens with a hook or whatever, and or a way of doing it, or it could be anything. And Richard O'Raw's case with the Jerry Conlon one. Uh, I just saw in the paper that, I know Richard, him and I both worked at the dock together as young dockers way back in the early 70s, and our families know each other and so on. But he released a book written about one of his early childhood friends, Jerry Conlon, and I read it over about 2 or 3 nights, and I just said, this has to be a play. Has to be a play. It has everything in respect of the human condition. And I approached Richard. We had a bit of lunch, and he was all for it, and we went for it. He was astounded when I said it could be a one-man play. He couldn't see that at all. Richard doesn't have a background in the theatre. And it was only when we actually got down to write it. And then when he saw it, Name of Son was performed for a week on tour before we would get into a lyric theatre. Sold out all the regional venues and standing ovations every night. And Richard couldn't believe the final product, as a non-theatre person.
Certainly. And is that going to come back, Martin? Whenever
Yes.
eventually, whenever that may be, is that one of the first ones you're bringing back, or?
Well, actually, it was. I went on my own personal lockdown on the 10th of February, and we were due
Oh,
no 10th of March, and we were due to go into the Lyric Theatre on the 17th of March for 2.5 weeks or 2 weeks with In the Name of the Sun. We had sold over 3,000 tickets. Like we were sitting at 60% or something like that. The interest in the play was phenomenal. And that was the first major main stage lyric play that was cancelled.
wow.
And I called that because the truth was, Mick, that I wouldn't ask other people to go to a lyric theatre at that time. When I wouldn't have went to it, I wouldn't have went into an enclosed space, having a few underlying issues and stuff like that, like diabetes. So I wasn't going to ask other people to do it, and we talked to Jimmy about cancelling it, and he agreed. So in fairness to Jimmy, he knows that we were the first out, and he's looking at us being one of the first back in again when the Lurry get the final green flag to go ahead again. I would think somewhere between March and June of next year.
Okay. Can we talk about, in 1987, A Prayer for the Dying? How did that come about? What did you learn from it? And what was it like meeting the likes of Mickey Rourke?
It was just an incredible experience from start to finish. You know, being in the center, the heart of Hollywood production, as it were. It was a Sam Goldwyn film, so it was all of that. It happened when a phone call came to my mother's house in Turf Lodge, and my mum would have been used to hearing a BBC person calling me up or somebody with an English accent. She'd never heard, "Hi, can I speak to Martin Lynch?" This very soft American accent, and it was Mickey Rourke. It turns out that uh, the film people had hired a local man called Brendan Gunn from Fermanagh, who had become a dialogue coach at this stage. They had hired him to go out to Los Angeles and teach Mickey Rourke the Irish accent, the Belfast accent. And Mickey, at that point, was completely dissatisfied. I found all this out later. Mickey was completely dissatisfied with the script. He thought it was cosmetic. He thought it was no depth to it, and an action movie just for the sake of it. Based on an original book by Jack Higgins. And he was looking around for a rewrite, and he asked Brenton who he could think, and Brenton recommended me. So that's how it came to be me. And Mickey, I got on the phone to him a few hours after that, and he was already in London at this stage doing prep for the shooting of the film. Like, this was probably something like late August, early September, and filming was to start sometime in November. And he said, could I come over to London on Tuesday? And I think that was a Friday or a Saturday. So I let on to go, oh, wait a minute now, Mickey, hold on, well, maybe you have this to do and have that to do. I was on the flight to London on the Tuesday, being picked up by my own personal chauffeur who stayed with me for 2 weeks. I had to actually chase him. He was sitting outside the door of the flat waiting to drive me about, and I had to tell him to go away. Very nice fella called Sam from Australia, but I mean, put into the heart of Mickey Rourke's world, so you can imagine what it was like. He was a content. Hold on, son. Are you away? Do you need your coat on? Have you got a coat? If you need a coat, come back. Okay. If you need a coat, come back. Where was it, Mickey? Yeah, yeah. Mickey quite rightly hated Hollywood. He hated the way it functioned and the way it operated, and the lack of substance to the movies. You know, all that sort of stuff. And he wanted a real script, and he hated Hollywood. Like, if I can say this in your podcast, his secretary, a guy called Bruce, said to me that when he goes on tour in the States with his own caravan, or whatever they call them, trailers, he has a section at the back. Well, first of all, in the front, there's all these buttons you press, a TV comes up, the shower comes up, two girls come up, you know, all that sort of stuff. But at the back, there's a doorway, which is his own private area, and a big sign on it says, no motherfucking cocksucking executive producers allowed beyond this point. So that's the type of guy he was. Now he paid for it. He paid for it dearly many years later. And I don't know if you remember, he was on the what's the British Film Awards called? I can't remember.
After.
The BAFTAs.
Yeah.
And he practically pleaded with producers. He says, "Look, I'm reformed and I won't behave like that. If you hire me, I'll do you a good job." But in those days, he was trouble, and he caused hellish trouble. He sacked two directors. The first guy down to direct it was Frank Rodham, who did If We'd Have Sent Pat, the TV series, and had just done another movie and been successful. And Mickey sacked him after 2 months or something like that, until he eventually settled on the guy who made Get Carter, okay, Make Somebody. But Mickey was just complete rebel from start to finish, controversial, and he had the power at the time. He had just done 9.5 weeks. And in fact, it was in the cinemas in downtown Belfast the day he rang my mother's house. So that went through the roof, hugely successful. He was a big name, and he could tell Hollywood to fuck off, whenever he wanted. So I know, and of course, allegedly, in his that first successful period, he selected his co-leading actresses on the basis that they had to agree that making love meant making love for real on the set. And I don't know if I've never done a complete examination of his movies, but apparently that's the way it went.
So, a troublemaker, a hellraiser, and going against the system. You got on well with him then?
I did actually. Uh, it was just coming to an understanding to realize that he wasn't intellectually the greatest man in the world, but he had a great instinct. And he had great instinct for acting, and he had great instinct for scripts and all the rest of it. So the first thing we had to do when I went to London, then I was put up in Darth Vader's flat in West London, somewhere near Notting Hill or somewhere like that. And I would have script meetings in the mornings with the director guy, Mike somebody, and Mickey. And then I would go away and rewrite new old scenes into new scenes, and indeed add in a lot of new ones. And then I would walk out into the street at 11 o'clock at night, or the next morning, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, walk in the old Brompton Road, I think is where we're staying, around the Chelsea area. And I would wave down, this is 1986, I would wave down a black taxi with my Belfast accent and hand an envelope to a taxi driver and say, "Would you bring that down to such and such, the address of the production offices?" And I can tell you, I had to do about 4 taxis before anybody would accept it. But that was a process that we did. Then, of course, we got to a point where Mickey and I agreed that it needed a more thorough radical rewrite that would get the storyline following right through from the start to the finish. So the idea was then that he would come to Belfast, and he wanted to look around Belfast as well as all of that. But we actually spent most of the time in his hotel room in the Culloden Hotel. He didn't slum it like by staying with Aaron Newell and Turf Lodge, as some other well-known people have done. Mickey stayed in the Culloden, and we hammered out loads of new writing. The whole play, the whole screenplay was really refocused. I gave him a background. I gave him loves and hates and dreams and all the rest of it. He wasn't just this guy going around shooting people, which was what the original script was about. And Mickey just loved that. He loved that. But of course, in the heels of the hunt, a lot of it was all scrubbed and dropped behind Mickey's back by the producers, which Liam Neeson was involved in. But I'll not say too much about that.
And did Mickey meet your family? Did he go up to where you were from?
Oh, he did. He brought him up to Turf Lodge, and he came to. It was a Sunday night. He came to a local social. One of the famous stories is we were sitting in the lounge having a drink, just me and him, my wife then, and I have to say, forgot to say that everywhere Mickey went, a guy called oh Jesus, this is awful. a big Greek guy who looked like an uglier version of what do you call him?
Telly Savalas.
Telly Savalas. And he was Mickey's Manfredi, bodyguard, gopher, the whole lot. And everywhere Mickey went, he went. And we're sitting in this lounge having a drink, and I says, Mickey, what I knew there was the Sunday night senior citizens dance was on in the big hall. And I says, Mickey, you wouldn't mind coming in to meet my mum? And I had my mum and my sisters all primed up. They were all in there waiting to meet him. The sisters were all keen to meet this Hollywood movie star who had just been in 9.5 weeks. So there's a wee hallway leads up from the lounge to the big hall. And we're walking up. He had a big sweater that he had bought in Leyland Halls and Royal Avenue. I brought him to that, and he bought a few things, scarves and hats, and a big Irish sweater. He's wearing it and a pair of brown corduroy trousers. And halfway up the hall, he says, Martin, is there a bathroom? I said, just here. He's in the bathroom, and he looks in the mirror, turns on the water taps, run the water through his fingers, and then shook his hair like that. Looked at himself, said, let's go. And he went in. And of course, he ended up dancing with my mother round the hall of Turf Lodge Social Club. Nobody knew him. No, he wasn't that sort of mega famous at that time.
Yeah.
Plus, not many of those senior citizens had gone and watched 9.5 weeks. But my oldest sister, Anne, says, God's sake, Malachy's better looking than him. That was her husband. So that was one of the great stories. But essentially, the big mate Lenny, the Greek guy, was terrified being in Belfast. So they didn't go anywhere. It hardly went anywhere. The one place he wanted to see Bobby Sands' grave.
Right.
And I brought him up to Milltown Cemetery and showed him that. And then there was a guy called Robbie Hunter, an ex-Republican who had got involved in the trade union movement in California, and he wanted to meet his people. So I brought him over to the New Lodge. Robbie Hunter was actually reared beside, quite close to me. And there was nobody at home at the time, so he didn't get meeting them. But most of the time we spent in the Cludden Hotel hammering out a new script.
And did he buy a leather jacket?
Well, that was in London one day. We were walking down the road. I can't remember what had gone on or where we'd been or whatever. And he went into a shop and he was buying some stuff. And he says, "Do you want to get a coat?" I said, "No, that's not making him alright, blah, blah, blah." He says, "Go look, find the most expensive coat you can get." And I didn't really do that, but I'd never had a leather jacket in my life before. And I thought, hold on, Mike, what? No, not the park. Is your mummy going, Tom?
Yeah.
Only if your mummy or your daddy's going.
My mummy going.
Okay, we'll go and find a coat, Tiernan.
We will make sure he.
Yes, and get a coat.
Yeah.
I might have to go and get this.
No.
What?
That's no problem. No problem.
So where was it?
Mickey, the leather jacket.
And I just happened to be. I didn't go looking for the most expensive coat. Happened to rate his head a couple of tasty looking leather jackets, and I got that. And he says, "Work away, no problem." And he bought the leather jacket. So it hung in my wardrobe for a long, long time, and I think it's gone now. But it certainly doesn't fit me now. Put it that way.
A great gift to get, brilliant thing to have, like,
Yeah, it was great experience, but seeing the whole Hollywood process, in action and all that stuff. And it was a constant battle between him and the producer, a guy called Peter Snell, that's the right name, from a New Zealand producer, and I can remember they just fought daggers. I was writing scenes, Mickey was loving them, and Snell was hitting them. Things like that. And apparently Mickey had already got $1 million advance. His first ever $1 million movie, but he hadn't signed a contract.
Right.
He just had so much power over these people. And that man, Snell, he was just turning his hair out the whole time that I saw him. But great to watch all that in action. I remember one time, I have this card up the stairs. We were in the production offices, and the director, the Get Carter director, Meg Hodges. So you get all the names eventually, Mick. Meg Hodges was saying some stuff and all the rest of it. And Mickey and I were sitting beside each other at a very wide table. So I saw Mickey scribbling stuff on a menu, a big hard card menu. It had to be sitting there. And he passed it to me. He says, "Don't listen to the motherfucker. You and I'll do this script between us." That's the way it went. It was a great experience.
Fantastic. Do you need to get,
Another time he took me in the big limousine a Sunday afternoon out to see Lenny McLean fighting.
wow.
And, like Lenny McLean, the governor.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the most extraordinary day and event ever. I mean, I could talk for half an hour about that fight. That was terrific.
And Mickey Rourke being a mad keen boxer himself, and not bad at it, like, you know.
He was bad at it, Mickey. I watched a couple of his fights, and I don't think he landed a proper punch the whole time. Oh, he tip tops. He was defending himself most of the time. He wasn't a good boxer. I mean, he could stand there, and
He had a go.
he didn't have a go, in my opinion. The fights that I saw, anyway.
A few years later, 1990, you wrote Rinty. Speaking of boxing,
Yes.
Was that experience of going to see that fight with Mickey? Was that your first time introduction to boxing? Had you always been a boxing fan, and why did the story of Rinty resonate so much with you?
Oh, no. I boxed. I had 2 fights for the Newsboys Club when I was 11.
Wow.
Won and drew one, so I retired undefeated. But no, my dad was a huge boxing fan. Like, my dad got me an argument up in the middle of the night to watch Sonny Liston and Cassius Clay, at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
In 1963, I think. 64 maybe. So my dad used to talk about Sugar Ray Robinson all the time as the greatest fighter, the greatest pair of hands he ever saw, and all that kind of stuff. So, I grew up with names like Rocky Graziano, Jack Dempsey, all those names. And of course, our local ones.
Yeah.
Rinty Monaghan, Bunty Dorn, Tommy Stewart. And here's the incredible thing. Those 3 were in the top 10 flyweights in the world at one stage. And they all lived within about 600 yards of my house.
Wow.
Rinty lived in, forget the name of the street, New York Street or something. Bunty lived in Nelson Street. Bunty was Rinty's cousin, actually. He lived in Nelson Street, and Tommy Stewart lived a couple of yard walls away from us. Tommy Stewart's one of the great, as is Bunty, one of the greatest uncrowned boxers of that era. So also when I was a kid, I'd be going over to the chapel. Say our Seamus take me to chapel, 10 o'clock mass on Sunday. Haven't darkened the church door since I was about 15, but used to get taken along North Queen Street to St Patrick's Chapel, and standing outside the Tin Hut, which was a local snooker club, would be Rinty. And Seamus was saying to me, "There's Rinty Monaghan. He was a champion of the world 10 years ago." I says, "What?" He says, "He was a champion of the world." He says, "He couldn't be standing outside the Tin Hut on the way to chapel." And things like that. These things were in proximity to you. So all of that was there, and then as time went on, I always knew there was good boxing play in me. I'm trying to think of the catalyst for why I picked Rinty. I can't recall it right now, but like all the subjects that you rate as a play. If you don't fall in love with the subject, you've picked the wrong subject. I fell in love with Rinty. Fell in love with the story. I mean, the story was incredible. Where he had fought Renty had really had two parts to his career. The first part up until about 1945, where he had about 600 fights and didn't take it, not 600, but you know what I mean, loads of fights, probably 60 or 70 professional fights, where he didn't really take the game seriously. He was doing it to earn a living, like a lot of boxers did. And then he got beat by somebody. I can't remember who it was. It made him Bunty in an open air fight at the Oval in 1945. And from then on, he vowed to take it seriously. And that's when he really, really went at it. Trained like a dog. And within the next 4 years, 3 years, whatever it is, was world champion, you know. Flyweight champion of the world, undisputed.
Do you still follow the boxing, Martin?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, but I couldn't tell you who's the current 4 light and middleweight champions in the world right now. But yeah, I would still have a strong interest in most of the boxing that goes on. Yeah.
So when Muhammad Ali came here in 1972, did you get anywhere near him?
Not at all. No, he came to Dublin, but I'll tell you who it did get near. Although not really, he was walking around our district with Sonny Liston.
Right enough.
Yeah, Jerry McAllister was a famous hard man and boxer from around our way. His son ran Holy Family Boxing Club for a long time, Bobby McAllister. But Jerry fought as Patsy Quinn. I remember when I was about 7 or 8, my dad took me down to St. John Bosco's club in Sailortown. And the only one in it training on a Sunday morning was Jerry McAllister, Patsy Quinn. My dad had gone down to say hello to him and that, you know. So, I mean, that was amazing. Well, Patsy Quinn went to sea for a while, and he went to New York, and he fell in with Sonny Liston in New York. They became great mates. This is before Sonny Liston's famous. So when Liston was champion about 1963 or 4, he arrived in Belfast to meet his old mate Jerry McAllister. I mean, incredible.
Yeah,
There's great photos of big street gatherings in Sailortown with Sonny Liston in the middle, a big giant of a man with a Thomas Shanter hat, you know, kind of Irish or Scottish hat, and he slept in Jerry McAllister's sofa.
You're kidding me.
Slept on the sofa. Madame met him in Barney Valerie's pub. Like, you know, when a boxer comes now, they go to your hotel or somewhere fancy, the Glidden Hotel. Jerry McAllister brought Sonny Liston, the champion of the world, to Barney Valerie's pub in Sailortown, where there was sawdust on the floor. He put up a fiver to buy everybody in the bar a drink, and he got about £2.50 change or £2.10 because everybody was on cheap wine.
Fantastic.
So Sonny Liston bought my dad a drink as the end of that story.
That's brilliant. Brilliant. I met Mike Tyson when I was in Vegas there in February.
Yes,
Which
very
was,
good. That must have been
unreal. Like, you know, and I don't know whether you've seen, he's looking at making a comeback.
It did. 54 or something?
Yeah, he is, yeah. And he's in incredible shape. So, you know, I don't know that you don't know how you feel about it. You know, guys in their 50s fighting, should it be allowed or should it not be allowed? But at the end of the day, if Mike Tyson's fighting, I'm buying a ticket.
Well, here's the point. He'll have the punch. They say it's the last thing to leave.
Yeah.
But what he won't have, and from the age of about 36 onwards, boxers lose the ability to take a punch.
Yeah.
And at 54, he will have no capacity to take a punch whatsoever. Like, his body will not take it. His legs will be half the strength they were when he was 30.
Have you seen the clips online of him training?
I did. It is, I know. He's a phenomenon. As it happens, I've been actually looking at a lot of his fights on YouTube. What a phenomenon, that man! What you notice, the thing I came away with, which I didn't notice so much when I was watching the fights at the time, but looking back on them now, the amount of times he missed, right? And when he missed, his whole body went right round to the other side of the ring almost. He was trying to kill people with every punch.
Yeah.
That's how he knocked people out. He wasn't tapping about the place. What?
Don King would give him $100,000 if he knocked somebody out in the first round. So he was just going out swinging, going.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Oh,
Once I in this guy in the first round, it's an extra 100 grand. You know.
yes, hold on, Mick. Yes, son. Right, come round here. Hold on, Mick. I fix it. Are you just going to the park? And is Tom's mummy going?
Yeah.
Right. Right, let's get it round this way. Why did you put her on the wrong way, you silly boy?
Oh, I don't know what's wrong.
You're a wee dodo, aren't you? You stupid dodo.
You're Dodo. You're Dodo. You're Dodo.
Right, arms in.
You don't even remember. Sorry.
I know. I can't remember things he says. Hold on to fix the collar. There you go. I close the front door, son. Right,
Mark,
Mike.
the history of the Troubles.
Yes.
Fireball.
Yes.
How does somebody sit down and come up with Fireball?
It wasn't difficult at all. I just remembered a guy who I used to love, who used to vigilante with us in the early 70s on Turf Lodge. And, you know, in our house, we had great laughs remembering this guy over the years. So he was always there, you know, since the early 70s. And it was only a matter of, I think I've obviously probably exaggerated him quite a bit. But this man did have a lisp. He did live in Turf Lodge, and he used to be at the barricades. Now, if you weren't there, Mick, but if you had been at the barricades in '69 and the early '70s, the level of tension was incredible. People were afraid, really, really afraid that they were going to be overrun by B specials or loyalists or the RUC at any minute that night. You know, if they used to look up on the Turf Lodge is built on the side of a mountain. So when we were vigilante, and I was only 18, 19, but all these men, like my dad was a mature man at the time, and I could see in his eyes he was concerned about the safety of his family. And if they saw something moving, or the vigilantes saw something moving in the field beside him, you know, it was probably a cow, usually was a cow. But next thing the rumour was spread around Turf Lodge, there's 200 B specials on the mountain. You know, so, and then, you know, there was houses and whole streets burned out. 6 people shot dead in the first 2 weeks. And we were all up at the barricades, men are debating. We need guns. We'll have to get guns. No matter where we get them, we'll get guns. Blah, blah, blah. And in the middle of that, this man walks in, Fireball, into this company. And what's going on here, man? What's all? Who's burning them buses? What's people burning buses for? There's no need for that. No need for that. And, you know, in the middle of that kind of tension, it was extraordinary. Such a juxtaposition, you know, between views of the world or views of. He had just committed Kelly's where he was throwing darts, you know, while half of Folger was burning down. Fireball was went on the match that put them second in the league in the Dip Start League, you know.
He was doing the important stuff.
You know, to him, you know what I mean? That was the most important stuff. And that's what makes the world go round.
And a character like Fireball, I take it you could write Fireball all day long because you know how he thinks, you know his attitudes towards anything.
That's right. That's right. I could put Fireball in the meeting between Boris Johnson and the chief medical officer for England, and I know what Fireball would be saying. You know, there's 200 people died last night with coronavirus. Oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. Do you know how Halifax went last night in the League Cup? I have a Yankee on them, you know, things like that, you know.
And will you ever return to writing Fireball, or is it?
I don't know. It's, you know, we did it with History of the Peace.
Yep.
We did that for a run at the Opera House and a tour, and it worked very well. But the problem itself was beset with shall we say script problems, and it didn't quite achieve the heights. In fact, it didn't come near achieving the heights of what I wanted it to be. and of what it could have done.
And you think that's because when you're looking back at the Troubles, the tension is there and the stakes are so high, whereas when you're looking back at peace, it's just not the same scenario?
I wouldn't. That could be true. That could be true, but I actually don't buy that, because there was enough. There was enough going on. As you know, History of Peace was mainly set in Protestant areas, and yes, there wasn't the high stakes religion issues or community conflict, war issues. There was community conflict, but I actually think we just didn't get the script right.
Right, okay.
For reasons which I probably shouldn't go into.
Certainly. Around the time History of the Troubles first came on, the Cathedral Quarter was kind of kicking in. You were pivotal to the Cathedral Quarter as an idea and getting it off the ground. Can you tell me how you got involved in that? What the idea was behind it? Did it turn out the way you thought it would? Up until we closed down, the Cathedral Quarter was the spot to be, and it's bunged, and you go down there, it's a ghost town. How did that all come about, Martin? What was your vision of it? What was your involvement in it?
Well, it started when Lenny Mullen and David Calvert took over a community arts group called the Neighbourhood Open Workshop, and they invited me down to write a play, community play, which later became Moths. So they were based on Academy Street, a wee entry off Academy Street, which is right in the heart of Cathedral Quarter, just beside the Belfast Education Library Board, the back of the Art College there, where Mac is now, just very close to that. And so I spent a lot of time there, and the Duke of York pub was the only pub in the whole district, and it closed at 6 o'clock at that point. We're talking in the early 90s, 93, 94, 93, 94, maybe, 92 even. And so there's a lot of discussions and crack and all about everything and anything. But for me, it was like going home, because I was reared, 500 yards from where Cathedral Quarter is, which I knew as the half bop. I played football with Archie Smith and Mickey Smith and all them. They rolled from the half bop, and I was from the Barrack Wall across the other side of York Street. So walking from the neighbourhood and workshop off the premises down to Duke of York was like a nostalgia trip for me. There's where Noel's Bag Store was my first job. There's where Archie Smith lived. There's, and the wee narrow lanes and the cobblestones, and I just loved it. In the meantime, I'd obviously travelled quite a lot around Europe, and the last big trip I'd made was to Bilbao. And Bilbao has this incredible story where they built a museum in a rundown docks area. What's the museum called, Mick?
No idea.
Well, it's world famous now. I mean, it transformed, isn't this just mad? Anyway, this museum was built by the international competition and by the Guggenheim Museum.
Guggenheim.
There was a Guggenheim Museum in New York that we all know, and they decided they want to open another one in Europe. And they had 10 cities lined up: Berlin, London, Madrid, and all that stuff. And a wee stupid small town, but very, very, very similar demographics to Belfast. Shipyard industry, docks, the whole lot, all collapsed. Manufacturing, depressed city. And a young Lord Mayor, I think he was 32 years of age, insisted on getting on the list, and they ended up winning. And that became the Guggenheim Museum, which is the most extraordinary building you ever set foot in. No work of art will ever match the building. No one of those situations. It's just incredible. Built down by the river. So, and right beside the Guggenheim Museum, there was an old town. And we walked around the old town and the cobblestones and bars and stuff like that, you know. And then I saw the rejuvenation of Barcelona going right back. I was researching a film for about Frank Ryan back in the late 80s, and Barcelona had been depressed since the Spanish Civil War, basically. And suddenly the Olympics were coming up there, I think 2 years from hence, and there was a whole rejuvenation building working on in Barcelona. And they had a big old town, which was incredible, you know. And of course, old towns are the oldest parts of districts. There was a few others. So I came back to Belfast and I'm walking back and forward to Duke of York, and I thought, this is the oldest part of Belfast. This could easily be a cultural district. So I went home one night luckily at the time I was director of the Community Arts Forum, so I was getting a wage and I had the time to do this. I went home over a couple of nights and wrote out a paper, about 12 pages of what could happen in Cathedral Quarter. Couple of the key things was there was a big car park right in the middle of the half bop where Edward Street used to be, and I thought if we got we need a major arts venue, and if that car park could be given over to an arts venue, that would be an anchor tenant, as it were. I also had this idea that Hill Street would become an open air arts market, you know, that you have even in Dublin and Hyde Park and places like that, where visual arts are sold. All of those things, and the idea that we could encourage arts groups to come to there. At that time, there was maybe about 7, 10 arts groups who'd gone there because the place was derelict. Northern Visions, neighbourhood open workshops, community arts forum ourselves. The Belfast Community Circus had just arrived in, a few others, and that was the nucleus of what was already there. The unemployed centre played a pivotal role because they had just bought a shop front in Donegal Street for £29,000, paid for by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. And the director of that was Brendan Mackin. And by the time we arrived down there in the mid-90s, he had bought the whole building and moved it right down the back, bought a section at the back, and was about to open a new bar called the John Hewitt, as we then knew. So that was the only activities in the whole area. Under Needham's inner city north urban grants, he had helped bring in Nick's Warehouse, and Barry Todd Architects had bought the building there, and a couple of wee things like that, not much. The whole urban grants thing had stopped by the time I came, and everything had come to a standstill again. Sorry if this is a bit long-winded, Mick, but it's just a gestation of it. So I went and wrote this paper, and I showed it to Brendan Mackin at the unemployed centre. I showed it to a few other business people, Barry Todd, and they all thought it was a great idea. So Brendan Mackin, because he we bit involved in community politics at that time, got it sent to Ronnie Spence, Department of the Environment, the permanent secretary, and he got us a meeting with his under secretary at that time, a man called Dick somebody, and we went and met him and we showed him the paper and all the rest of it and what the area could become and so on. And about 3 months later, maybe 6 months later, we got a phone call. He wanted to come down and look at the place, Dick McKenzie. And lo and behold, he came down one wet Wednesday tea time nearly, and it was raining. The place was dead. The only thing you saw, like if you can imagine, the where the Merchant Hotel is now, it was boarded up. The other side of the street was basically boarded up. There was nothing there, nothing in the whole district. The Northern Wing was boarded up, nothing there at all. We had another hotel at the bottom of Donegal Street, that wasn't there. And he says Ronnie Spence really loves the idea. He loves it. and he wants to take it further. So then about another 6 months or a year after that, we heard that an Edinburgh company had been appointed to develop a programme. And we were all invited down to Laganside's premises because Ronnie Spencer had decided that Laganside was going to take this forward. And the most incredible thing happened because there was about maybe 20 or 30 people at this meeting, including some city councillors and so on. And this company in Edinburgh, forget their name, presented a slideshow with all my ideas, all of every one of them. This is what we want to do in the area, blah, blah, blah. And that's the origination of the idea. The second part of the question, as quickly as I can, the progress was painstakingly slow. We were losing premises, we were losing people as the months went on and so on, until eventually Laganside launched it. They held a name for what it should be called. That was Cathedral Quarter. And then what happened was loads of arts groups. Once they described that it was going to be an arts and cultural quarter with no basis, nothing there at all, except the half a dozen groups that were there. Once they announced that, I'm sitting in the CAF offices, which were fairly public, big windows, and I was inundated with arts groups from all over Belfast wanting to move into Cathedral Quarter. And I says, well, have you been with Laganside? They said, yeah, they just hand us estate agents' names and addresses and tell us to go and get premises through the estate agents. So at that point then I lobbied Mike Smith, the director of Laganside. I told him I was coming down with a couple of groups to his office to let him know what the demand was. And I landed down with about 20 people, about 20 groups into his office. I had to go and get extra chairs and all. And everybody was there, all the Belfast Print Workshop, loads of groups from outside, David Boyd, Belfast Carnival, all wanting to move into this new arts and cultural quarter, which there was none, there was nothing, it was just an idea. And he got the message, and fair play to them, they bought 3 buildings. The one on Royal Avenue, which is there, where Northern Visions and Belfast Exposed are now, and they also bought Belfast Circus, a purpose-built building and paid for it and all the rest of it. So that was a kind of progress, but that was over like 2-3 years. I wanted it all to happen. I didn't know it wasn't happening now. And I spent like probably 8 years pursuing that dream and fighting for everything and anything. And very, very frustrating that it didn't happen. And in the end, I remember the first culture night, and I was standing at the bottom of Hill Street and Warren Street, and thousands of people running about. Not as many as there later became, but a huge amount of people running about. And my dream was coming true in front of my eyes. I couldn't believe it. Where there'd been two postmen walking by Dick Mackenzie and me 6-7 years earlier. There's now thousands of people swirling about, and there was art, there was circus going over here, there was drama going over there was music going over there, and it was just built on since that. Two big disappointments. Naturally, same thing happened as has happened in Temple Bar, is that it became very much drink driven. Now, you know me, I love a bar and drink like everybody else, but the cultural product was few and far between. The one big cultural product that we did get, the Mac, was a huge disappointment for me, because I thought that was going to be, as close as we could get to a community arts venue with professional input, and that didn't happen. I would have improved a bit over a period of time, but my test of the Mac is, what's the real contact with their hinterland? If you start at the Lower Shankill, Carrickkill, New Lodge, Tigers Bay, York Road, go even across the river to Short Strand and the markets. What's the connection between the Mac and those communities? All it really is has been is that they have had workshops, what do you call that? Community engagement,
Yeah.
what's it called now? The Arts Council have a name for it. But small outer ring stuff. There's no big community plays, but they haven't gone into the New Lodge and said, "What do you want from our centre? Do you have a play in there? Do you have an issue in there that we put on a community play? Is there local artists here we could put on their exhibitions?" And instead, it's become very like any art centre around the UK or Ireland, with for professional artists generally, and that would all be part of my plan as well. But it also should have a very, very strong community dimension, which goes beyond mere community outreach.
How do you think that can be solved?
Oh, I don't know. Unless there was some kind of radical clear out at the Mac at the very top level, unless they changed their philosophy or somebody changed it for them, I think the Mac will continue as it is. And like, let's not uh, be through the baby out with the bathwater. The Mac does a huge amount of good work as well,
Yes.
but its central core tenets aren't right, and that's the problem. Like I brought plays in there, had to fight to get them in the 2 years prior to the opening. Uh, that got mass audiences from around those communities, but by and large, it doesn't get. The nearest district's my old district to the Mac, which is North Queen Street, Henry Street, Lancaster Street, and I know that if I went and rapped doors uh, with the chief executive of the Mac, and we went along there and rapped the doors and says, "When was the last time you're in the Mac? What was it for?" We'd get the answers that would be pretty low involvement. So I don't know what the change would be, and I don't know what you do about commerciality. The market is a huge thing in any capitalist society. So if people want to have drink at the core of at the core of the district, uh, that is going to happen. I mean, it certainly gladdens my heart to see all the restaurants, and I think Willie Jack has done a tremendous job in lightening up the area. Again, it's very drink concentrated, but I don't mind that. It's up for the government agencies, in my opinion, probably to create the cultural product. Like there isn't one significant art gallery in the whole district. That's a disgrace, you know. Not one single major art gallery apart from the Max in-house ones. But a district like that should have art galleries all over the place.
Certainly. I mean, the Mac were very good with me this year in terms of taking a short film I made and putting it on their website and putting it online and posting it out there for me. So,
Well, Simon McGill is a great
Simon,
addition.
what's that?
Simon McGill's a great addition to the Mac, and he has changed things. He's responsive, blah blah blah. So that's a great help.
Yeah, certainly. Within the Cathedral Court area, you mentioned the John Hewitt Bar, where you have Lynch's Corner. Was that around 2009, 2010? Did that happen?
Yeah, but 2011, I think.
2011.
Don't know for certain.
You were given an award. What was that award about? How did Lynch's Corner comes about? Do you still meet there?
Well, it came about because there's a wee table there that I like to sit at when I was. I mean, I haven't been in the John Hewitt Bar in a year for all this stuff, but I used to have lunch there a lot of times, and anybody I was meeting, I would meet there and at that table at the window, and that's just where when somebody said to Jerry White that the Belfast City Council with the Lord Mayor Martin Muller was awarding me What was that award about? What was that called?
All these awards, too many to remember.
Uh,
Was it the? I'm trying to think. I was there that night.
I
What
was in the inaugural first,
contribution for the arts or community? It must have been.
and I was the very first one of that Lord Mayor's tenure. That award didn't continue after him, but he was trying to create uh, role model citizens, I think, throughout the city, and I was the very first one. So that's what that coincided with. And Jerry says, "Well, he always sits over there," and then they got the wee plaque in that corner. Now it's actually embarrassing because I still want to sit there to meet people, to still meet lots of people there. And then I'd go and sit in this corner with a plaque above my head, and people think, "Well, look at that poser there." But that's not the way. That's not the way of it.
That could be a good place. I think you could do your own podcast, Martin. That could be a good place for you to do your podcast live from Lynch's Corner.
Like, I don't even know what a podcast is. I know I'm in one right now, but I don't even know how.
It's having a conversation, posting it online, and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
You've influenced a lot of people, Martin, and you've always been really good with bringing in new talent and giving them opportunities, be that designers, directors, actors, and playwrights. And you always give people your time. I was wondering who have been your main influence and who's influenced you the most, who's been instrumental in your career, and is it through that relationship, is that why you always give people your time and you always help out the next generation of people coming through?
Well, first of all, whatever influences would have been external to Belfast. I mean, I would have been very strongly influenced by the work of Brendan Behan, Sean O'Casey. And then in England, people like Willie Russell, Alan Blease, the whole Liverpool group of playwrights that came through in the mid-80s, the Glasgow playwrights, the McGraths, and a few others who came through in Glasgow. And then what helped to change my life was, again, I used to spend a lot of time standing in bookshops. Gardner's Bookshop in Queen Street. I practically lived there for a long time in the 70s and 80s. And I lifted a book by Anne Jellicoe about community theatre. And it was the first time I'd ever heard the term. And even though I had already started the Turf Lodge Fellowship at that time to do plays, I didn't know that what we were doing was community theatre. And it was only by reading Anne Jellicoe's book bit by bit. I didn't even buy it. Those days I had no money. So buying books was a totally odd book, but I remember reading what she did. She brought in some professionals to work with amateurs, and then the place she was talking about at that time was a play in Devon, where she had moved to, and they brought David Edgar, a prominent playwright from Birmingham, in at the time to write it, and she directed it herself, I think, and had all these amateur people in a play on a locally based story. And I thought, wow, that's what I do. That's what I want to do. And then from then on, I understood the concept of community theatre. So that was a big influence coming across that book. At a professional level, it was I've been writing away on Turf Lodge for 4 or 5 years, and then we got a play or two on at the group theatre downtown, which had just reopened after bombing, and that brought me to the attention of the Lyric Theatre. And unbeknownst to me, Sam McCready, who had been newly appointed artistic director, had come to see they're taking the barricades down. Pierce O'Malley and John Boyd, the two directors of the Lyric, had also come to see it, and they all came to the conclusion that I should be brought up to Lyric to write a play. And so they brought out a thing called Resident Playwright, and invited me up. I had no idea what was going to happen. They invited me up to the Lyric one day, and they met me up in the top foyer, which isn't there now, but Pierce and Sam, and they told me they wanted me to be resident playwright for a year on £8,000 a year. I was on the dole on whatever that would have been at the time. I don't know, 15, £16 a week, and I was now getting £80 a week as resident playwright. So I couldn't believe it. And then Sam McCready became a big influence then, because he was the first person to tell me that I was good. and that just blew my head off. I thought I was just bucking my own goat, firing away, doing this stuff. And the other man who said I was good and told me I was an artist was Kieran Kuhn. He was the Peace People guy who was secretary of the Lyric Theatre at the time. And both Kieran and Sam, but particularly Sam, encouraged me. And then the way Sam did the theatre, he did my first two plays, Dockers and Ambrose Fogarty. And he blew me away with just the way that Richard Rowe was blown away with In the Name of the Sun. I was blown away by what they could do with my words. Because prior to that, we were using the disco lights and turf lights for lighting. And I had never seen proper lighting. So that was all a big change. I have to say that probably since that, I've always had my own confidence in who I am, Mick, and what I do, and I haven't had too many champions over the years, apart from Sam. So I've had to bang on my own and continue to believe in myself. And apart from reaching a bad period in the mid to late 90s, whenever I was struggling to get work done, but I concentrating a lot on community arts at the time. But I had a play which disappointed me a lot. The lack of success and even box office that it had was Pictures of Tomorrow, a play I wrote for the Lyric Theatre. And it didn't do great box office. And I was hoping to be picked up by, some of the other theatres, particularly in England, because it was an international subject. And it wasn't, and that was hugely disappointing to me. I got a bit disillusioned around then, and I just kept the focus on community arts. And then, of course, by the late 90s, I got itchy feet for getting back into doing more theatre and writing plays. And by 2002, I'd done the Belfast Carmen at the Opera House, and then the following year or two, I did the History of Troubles, and then I left CAF in 2000 to pursue. So, in terms of encouraging other people, Mick, you just have to use basic emotional, not use it, you just have to have basic emotional intelligence. And that is that when somebody's starting out, they know nothing from nothing. I knew nothing from nothing when I was starting out. And I wished I had had a playwright from similar backgrounds there for me in the late 70s and early 80s to tell me that I was okay and encourage me. In fact, what Sam did. So, I get writers, actors, all sorts ringing up to have a meeting to see, to see what's what. And I very, very, very seldom don't meet anybody. It's usually because I'm away or doing something. I always bring them downstairs to Northern Wig and spend a half an hour talking. I mean, if I can't afford that amount of time for people, I don't know what will. But there is some anecdotes over the years where people like Gary Mitchell said he wouldn't have become a playwright if he hadn't seen the interrogation Ambrose Fogarty at the Lyric. Mary Jones is on record as saying that when she first saw Dapper, she realised that was her voice. Mick Duke says when he saw the interrogation Ambrose Fogarty, it made him want to do theatre. So it's really nice and gratifying to hear things like that work that you did or you pioneered in some ways has influenced other people. But I think from start to finish, you must always encourage new people and talent. When I get a script, and I get lots of scripts, there isn't, say out of hundreds of scripts, there's only been about a handful that I'd say, that is utter shite. There's always something in somebody's script. There's always some element of talent, whether it's a humor, whether it's a structural talent, whether it's a character talent, whether it's a storytelling talent. There's always something there, but usually a writer doesn't have them all. And that's the problem, and that's what you've got to work on. But so therefore, I'm able to write back to the person and say, "There's what you have, and there's what you need to do."
Certainly, which is what you did with me when I first attempted writing plays. I remember sending it to you and being terrified.
Mick, you had
What's
fuck
that?
to go with it. You had nothing starting it with. I'm only joking. Only joking. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, you were very good to meet with me. You were very good. You gave me. We met in the Dark Horse actually for a coffee. And you went through the play, gave me a lot of support, showed me areas that I needed to work on. And had it not been for that meeting, it probably would have ended up just being words on a page, and I wouldn't have carried on. I had previously worked with you as a production manager on many different shows. And one of those shows in particular was Lay Up Your Ends, which I think was around 2009, if I remember correctly. I remember on the opening night of Lay Up Your Ends, which Ian directed, Ian McElhinney directed, we had the cast there, some original members. You had requested that you wanted some of the ex-cast and some mill workers to join the cast at the end of the show.
Yes.
And I remember at the time that it being, people not being too sure about it and going, well, this is the Opera House stage and this isn't the type of thing that normally happens. And you were 100% right. And I learned two very important lessons on that night. One being that you have always and still continue, you have always stuck with who you are as a writer and the people that you want to reach, and you've been very honest to who you are, and I think that stands you in good heed. But also on the night, once those ex-mill workers hit the stage, the Opera House went bananas. There was over 1,000 people were on their feet, and the show had gone down very well. But in that moment, there was just an emotion in the room that would have never been there had you not brought people up on the stage and talked about original cast members and talked about the original mill workers. Emotion is a big thing in how you write and direct, and a very important thing. Is that what drives you? Is it the emotions of the characters in the story that drives you to carry on writing, to carry on producing, to carry on directing? Or do you think emotion fits into what you do?
Yeah, I don't think it can be anything else as a central tenet. Yes, there's loads of things that make up for writing. There's subject matter, there's stories that affect but when you're exploring the play you're writing, as well as wrestling with narrative and structures and interactions between characters, the central thing you've got to get right is the emotional journey of each character. And if you don't get that right, then there is no serious emotion to the journey. And a play without serious emotion, as you get in Beckett, and dare I say it, Harold Pinter, is therefore seriously weakened at that point. And I know there's loads of people who want to go to the theatre and they don't want to be emoted. They don't want their emotions to be moved. They want to simply take in the basic themes of the story, etc. Well, you might as well read a book. If that's what you want out of the theatre. I go to the theatre, and a great night at the theatre is when I'm made to laugh, cry, angry, think, change my viewpoint. Like, believe it or not, when I saw the Willie Russell play, the one woman show, was it Shirley Valentine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Shirley Valentine. About a woman come to a point in her life whenever her life isn't enough anymore, and she wants to change it. Fundamental life-changing decisions are taken. And when you get that, Murray Jones does it very well in The Night in November. And when you get that, you get the most powerful emotions and the most intimate examination of who we are as a people.
Do you think, all going through what we're going through at the minute, people will think more about that when they return to theatre? Do you think people are examining their own life, their own consciousness, their own views towards death more so during this lockdown? And will that have a bigger impact on what we watch on stage?
Yeah, it's always tricky to try and predict things, but there's no doubt about it. Like when our Seamus went into jail in the early 70s for internment, he says lying up at the ceiling was the greatest opportunity he'd ever had to think about who he was and what he was and what he was doing. And this lockdown is having a similar effect on a lot of people. They're deciding who they are, what they want to do. Is it time for maybe enormous change, a great change, all that kind of stuff? So I think the lockdown is definitely promoting that within people. How it comes to manifest itself, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. So you talk there, obviously you have co-written and produced many of Mary Jones's shows. How did that come about? How much do you want to talk about it? You could probably do 2 hours talking about you and Mary. You have, I think, one of your new projects coming up was due to come up is another one on the Dead Rabbit Boys. Is there anything you want to talk about it?
Well, yeah. Well, just very quickly, Mari and the four actresses came to me in '82 saying they wanted me to write a play for them. And straight away, Mari was the center of the action. She was the energy, she was the drive, she was the personality. And I was attracted to her straight away. You can't help but not be attracted to that amount of energy. Mari is a human dynamo and has been like that from the start. And 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 when we were doing the first script for Lay Up Your Ends, I got them all in Anna McCarrick to go in and write wee bits and pieces, and Mari was the only one that came back with anything approaching energy and some type of level of skill. And then she wrote more scenes for that play and blah blah blah. And so it was also walking around the lake of Anna McCarrick that I realised that I had so much in common with Mari. Mari was the daughter of a shipyard worker who lived in a terraced house in East Belfast. I was the son of a dapper who lived in a terraced house in North Belfast. And our backgrounds were so very similar. The only thing that divided us was we were different religions, and we come from a different political background, as it were. I think I'm talking about the general sense. And but the movie we had in common was fantastic, and her and I got on very very well. So it was natural enough that over the years, then it became. I can't remember what the next thing I co-wrote with her. It might have been the Wedding Community Play in 1999, 2000. I went to her and we co-wrote that together along with the community group. And then she came to me with the George Best project because the writers had approached her, and I immediately thought it was a great idea. She felt inadequate about football, and she knew I was a big football man, so all that worked very well. And then I went to her with the Miami Showbound one. So it kind of worked that way, and God knows what will be next. And it has always worked very very well. Writing together can be hugely problematic, as I've found out in one or two other projects. But if both people are secure in what they do and know that they can write, then the generosity kicks in. And instead of trying to steal off each other or cop as much scenes or writing as possible, we're always offering them to each other. And so we've got this stage now where we just divide it up. When we work together, we hammer out the storylines, the characters together over a period of, say, 20 sessions. And then we'll come up with maybe, for talk's sake, we'll come up with 20 scenes. We just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20. And then we toss up who gets the even numbers and who gets the odd numbers. And that's the way it's split. She goes away and writes, say, for talk's sake, the even numbers, and I write the uneven numbers. Then we come together and we look at what fuck ups there are, what doesn't match what, and blah blah blah, and then we fix all those, and then we just carry on like that. So we've got a tried and tested way of working. We both, as I say, have the same background in life. We both think humor is very important, but we also think emotion is very important, and we think that plays should also, or the theatre should also represent the underrepresented, and those key ingredients make it work for both of us working together.
Brilliant.
And I have to say, I found the same with Gary. I wrote the 1932 play, The People of Gardner Street, with Gary Mitchell, and Gary was generous, and I was generous in turn, and so on. And when you get that, it's a daddle. It's a pleasure, because not only are you getting a play, but you're getting two talents put into the one play. See, that's an advantage. That has to be an advantage. There's drawbacks to it, but it certainly has to be an advantage. In other scenarios where people aren't secure about who they are, and it's a constant fight, then the two talents are being lost.
So when it works really well, and when it doesn't, it dies on its ass.
Oh, right, absolutely. That's it in a nutshell, man.
What is next for you? What's on the agenda?
Well, I want to get in the name of the sun up and running again. As I say, that's pretty much there. We're just waiting on the lyric landing in some type of terra firma early next year, and that should happen. I was during the lockdown. I have this project again in my head, 15 years, called it's a writing project, a local history project. Martin Lynch's favorite Belfast characters, and I've been taking notes and adding and deleting people to it for years. So this lockdown, I was meant to write that, and I must say I didn't hardly get any of it started. I ended up working on a big gardening project out the front, where I've transformed my front lawn into major botanical gardens, with natural stone walls and pergolas and all that stuff. And that has been a tremendous joy to be involved in. Nothing to do with writing, nothing to do with the theatre, just something totally different. And then I probably hope that my next play will be, as I said earlier, The Big Arab, a play about my father and his struggle between wanting to be a writer. He fancied himself as a poet. Wanting to be a writer as against what he was, a street fighter, brawling in the pubs of Sailortown. That constant struggle between a man who wanted to live that macho, had to live that macho, backer lifestyle, against a man who should have been writing poetry and been a writer in residence at the Queen's University or somewhere. So it's a great story.
And you're confident you'll get that written in the next year, finished? Sorry.
Not in the next year. I do want to get the characters book. I suppose the reason why the characters book has fallen back a wee bit is I know that we're in this pandemic, and I wanted to launch it this Christmas, and that really won't be very doable now. So I'll get that done. The winter months are coming in now, and I can't go out to the garden, so I have to do some writing. So it'll probably be the characters book between now and Christmas, and then I'll spend next year writing The Big Arab, and hopefully get it produced in 82 or 83.
Okay, brilliant. Martin, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated.
You're very welcome, Mick, and it's been a pleasure as always talking to your good self. And I will remind you that you have a significant amount of talent.
Thank you very much.